audience and sitting quietly. I like how I see people looking up here. Thank you for that. This morning, we have a famous author to join us to read to you. His name is Joe Ozier. I'm going to tell you a little bit about him. Joe Ozier has been a writer since his early teens, having dabbled in science fiction, poetry, lyrics, and haikus. He graduated with a degree in geology in 1981, but his passion was video production. Then, in 1998, Joe moved to Florida to pursue acting. His career as a stage, film, television, actor, and print model gave him a valuable education in the importance of presentation to one's audience. Also a playwright, Joe has currently developed 9 original stage plays and musicals. Joe's love for dogs and his knowledge of their behavior began with his family dogs. His first show was the result of a 10-year endeavor entitled Shep the Musical that centered on a lonely dog he found chained up to a doghouse outside his hometown in Fresno, California. Joe trained Shep to perform in many community theater productions. He was billed as Shep the Wonder Dog. Joe discovered Shea at the local Humane Society while doing research for his musical and realized that Shea had that something special. As a nice twist of fate, Shea was available for adoption on the very day Joe discovered her. Shea became Shep's love interest in the developing musical and in real life. As Joe quickly discovered, Shea was also an accomplished escape artist. Shea's savvy, street-smart spirit became the inspiration for the book. Joe moved back to California to take care of his mother in 2007. And by 2011, Joe began his next career as a professional dog trainer with the specialty of behavior training for dogs and people. He titled his new business, Way of a Dog. Joe loves going to work and teaching dog owners how to understand their dog's behavior. Shea's Lounge is Joe's first book. So boys and girls, we get to hear the actual author of this book read it to you this morning.
Good morning, everybody. How are you? Good! Woo-hoo! All right, you excited?
Yeah!
Nice. Okay. So, if we're ready to begin, now everybody can read this, right?
Yeah!
Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to have an audience participation in my reading today. So you have to watch and be aware of some of the things that are going to be coming up that I want you to participate in. So we're going to have a little test here. Are you ready?
Yes.
Okay. There you go. Big set. Everybody's heard the sound of a siren, right? Woo! You guys just waking up out there? All right, let's try it again. Have you ever heard a siren go down the street like? No. Okay. So sirens are always really loud, and sometimes you got to put your hands over there because it's so loud. All right. Here's another one. A lot better. Thank you. Okay. So you may applaud for yourselves. It's time to begin. My book is entitled Shea's Lounge, the story of a runaway dog that found her forever home, written by Joe W. Ozier. That's me. All right. Shea the runaway was a dog who lived for 2 years on the street. Every day of her life was a struggle to survive. She learned that eating food out of trash cans could keep her alive, but it also brought her lots of unwanted attention. Everyone she came across was always yelling and throwing things at her. She thought that this was the way dogs were supposed to live because it was the only life she knew. She never knew what it meant to have a real home. She lived and slept on the cold and sometimes mean streets of the town. She was always on the run and moving from place to place. She never slept in the same spot 2 nights in a row. The nights were cold, and the people she met were mostly unfriendly. She believed that this is how her life would always be. One of her favorite places to beg for food and water was the local fire station. The firemen were always happy to give Shea food because they could see that she was very hungry and that she looked helpless and alone. "The poor girl is homeless," said one fireman. "She has a very kind-looking face, but nobody has taken care of her. Just look at how skinny and dirty she is. This poor dog needs my help." So, on that particular day, the kind-hearted fireman gave her a ride in the fire truck all the way to the closest city. The fire truck stopped at the Humane Society, and Shea was taken inside and given a bath. It was the first bath of her life, so she struggled and tried to get away, but when she realized that the people who were scrubbing her weren't hurting her, and that she was smelling a whole lot better, well, she started to enjoy it. Joe was a nice middle-aged man who lived alone. He worked all day at the library, and when he came home, he enjoyed watching television to help him unwind. After a long week, he was settling in for a quiet weekend when a commercial came on TV advertising that the local shelter had lots of great pets to adopt. They mentioned how owning a pet can help prevent loneliness and add years to a person's life, not to mention adding years to the pet's life as well. Well, Joe thought to himself, I want to live longer, and perhaps I am a bit lonely. Why not at least go down to the shelter and look around? I don't have to adopt a pet if I don't want to. I'll just go and browse around. So, bright and early Saturday morning, Joe drove his car to the shelter and began looking at all the dogs. There were so many different types and sizes of dogs to choose from, but none really jumped out at him as the perfect companion. Joe figured it was meant to be, and so he began to walk towards the exit. Just as Joe was about to leave the shelter, he heard a rather distinctive bark. It was more like a woof than an actual bark. He looked over his shoulder in the direction of that woof, and there, sitting in a cage all by herself, was Shea. He looked over to her cage and then looked into her eyes. You have a good-looking face, and you seem nice enough, and you're about the right size, Joe said. Then he asked Shea, are you a good dog? Shea woofed and wagged her big bushy tail at Joe. Joe's heart skipped a beat. Joe knelt down right in front of Shea to get a better look at her. Joe smiled at Shea. Shea smiled back at Joe. Joe decided that Shea was the perfect dog for him. He couldn't believe how happy she made him feel. Shea looked like she felt the same way about Joe. So, Joe adopted Shea. Shea got her shots and her dog tag and her microchip, and Joe got a list of how to safely prepare his home for his new arrival. Joe then bought a big bag of healthy dog food from the pet store and drove Shea home. Joe took a bowl out of his cupboard and painted the name Shea on it in big bold letters. Joe filled that bowl with dog food and set it on his porch right in front of him. Well, Shea couldn't believe that Joe had given her food just like that. Well, Shea quickly ate every kibble in that bowl. Joe and Shea both realized that they were happier than they had been in years. Joe watched with pride as Shea wandered around his backyard, sniffing everything in her path. After a few minutes, Joe went back inside his home to make the necessary preparations for his new family member. Shea kept exploring her yard, and after a few minutes, she noticed a hole in the fence. Her survival instincts always told her to never stop and to always keep moving. So she squeezed through that hole and was gone in a flash. A few minutes later, Joe came back outside to check on his dog, but Shea was nowhere to be found. He looked everywhere for her, but no Shea. All he found was Shea's empty dog bowl. Joe got in his car and drove around the neighborhood calling out her name, but he could not find her. His heart sank at the thought of losing his new best friend. He wondered if he would ever see Shea again. After a few hours of driving the neighborhood, Joe came back home feeling very sad and worried about losing his new dog. As he entered his home, his phone was ringing, and to his surprise and joy, it was an officer from the Humane Society. He told Joe that he had caught Shea running in an alley. Joe said Shea must have escaped through a hole in his fence. The man told Joe he could come and get Shea anytime after Joe fixed all the holes in his fence. He also told Joe that some dogs who have lived on the street for a very long time tend to go back to that life because it's the only life they know. He said that some wild dogs can't live the simple life in a home and that perhaps Shea can never be tamed. Joe went out to his backyard and walked all along his fence line until he discovered where Shea had escaped. He felt so guilty. He blamed himself for not preparing his yard properly for his new guest. So, for the next few hours, Joe did what he could do to fix all the holes in his fence. He checked and rechecked all the places along his fence where Shea might escape, because he loved Shea and couldn't bear the thought of her wandering somewhere out in the big world again, all alone without him. Joe felt his yard was finally ready, so he drove back to the Humane Society and picked up his dog. Joe was so happy. Shea looked happy too. Joe brought Shea home, and again the two of them walked all around the yard, but Shea didn't seem like she was looking to find another way to get out. After they had their walk, they both sat together in Joe's backyard, enjoying each other's company. Joe sat on his backyard lounge chair, petting Shea the rest of the day. Well, Joe seemed very confident that Shea could not get through his fence, so the next morning he went to work without any worries. Shea found herself alone again in the yard. Once again, Shea's survival instinct told her to keep moving and to run away. And within a few minutes, Shea found a bit of soft dirt under a part of the fence. And with the determination of a trapped animal, Shea dug and dug until she was free. She squeezed under the fence and ran away without a care in the world. When Joe came home from work, he couldn't wait to see his new best friend. He went straight to the backyard and called for her, but she didn't come. Joe walked around his yard to find Shea, but what he found instead was a hole under his fence. Well, he immediately called the Humane Society, but they told him that she wasn't there. They reminded Joe about what he needed to do to make sure Shea couldn't get out. Joe told them that he had fixed all the holes in his fence, but that Shea had dug under his fence. Well, they were disappointed and saddened by his loss. They told him that perhaps Joe was incapable of taking care of her runaway dog like Shea. After running for hours, Shea stopped under a tree to rest. She thought that it felt good to be back in the wild, living on her own again, and being the master of her own destiny. Then suddenly a strange feeling came over her. She began thinking about what had happened to her over the last few days. She thought about the man who gave her his home, who fed her, and how she had enjoyed sitting next to him as he petted her. Then she remembered sleeping in the alleys filled with trash, and of the garbage cans that would be providing all of her future meals. Her survival instinct told her what to do next. She turned around and started to run, putting all of her canine senses into high gear. She began to see landmarks and familiar streets and smelled familiar things, so she began to run even faster. Finally, she came upon a neighborhood that looked right. It took her a few moments to get her bearings, but she found that familiar fence and slipped back through the same hole that she had dug from. When she was safely inside the yard, she jumped onto the lounge chair and waited for that nice man who had sat there once before, petting her. She never felt happier in all of her life. Her instinct now told her that she could stop running because she had found her forever home and her place in life on Shea's lounge. Well, thank you all for coming today and allowing me to be part of your Dr. Seuss Day. And are there any questions from anyone out there? Yes, you right over there in the red.
Why do you like dogs?
Why do I like dogs? Oh, I don't know. They're fuzzy and warm and friendly, and they provide great companionship. Have you ever owned a dog? Well, why do you like dogs? Because, okay, well, that's a good reason, but everybody has, different reasons about why they like something, or like what we're talking about, a dog. But dogs have beautiful souls, and as a dog trainer myself, I understand their inner workings a little bit, and I understand by looking at their eyes and their tails and their ears what's going on in their head without actually hearing them speak, because they speak a different language, right? So that's why I like dogs. That's some of the reasons why I like dogs. Yes, right back there.
How many dogs have you owned?
How many dogs have I owned?
No, I said books that you own.
Oh, this is the first book. This is my very first book. But it probably won't be my last, I hope. But, okay, right back there.
Is this a real story about you?
It's a true story, and yes, I am that Joe. Now, doesn't that look like me? Well, there's a funny story about that. The illustrator, I didn't illustrate the book, but the illustrator came up with, because I asked her she said, now is this a true story about you? And I said, yes. So the first drawing that she made looked more like me, but it looked like a really young me, like a 15 or 16-year-old young me. And I said, no, I need to look older. I need to look, in my 40s. So you gotta hold me up a little bit. And so, probably as a prank, she took off my hair and made me kind of chubby, and she said, so, how do you like that, Joe? And I go, I love it. It's perfect. So anyway, that's the story. But yes, that is supposed to be me. Right here in the blue. Yes.
How many dogs do you?
I just have one dog now, and he's a little dog named Jimmy, and he's a little 10.5-pound Pomeranian and Dachshund mix. Cute little guy. How about, boy, this side is the questioning side, and this side is the observing side, but that's okay. That's good. All right, so right here, you, little girl right there. Yes. The Toothless Wonder. Yes. Huh? Do I like stories? Yes, everybody likes stories, don't they? I mean, my parents read to me when I was growing up, and they told me stories. And both of my parents were teachers, and so they knew the value of telling stories and creating and letting children create images in their mind instead of watching television all the time, because television provides those images for you. So what's so important about reading is that you get to create the images in your own head while you read the story. Yes, dear, right here.
What inspired you to make so much people?
What?
What inspired you to make a book?
Oh, what inspired me to make the book? Well, the true story of this dog that I had adopted, who kept escaping from my home, and I took it personally, because what is it about me that this dog doesn't like? And the other dog that was also living with me was Shep, the Wonder Dog, and I guess she was just used to living in the wild and feeling free and not having the feeling of being domesticated like most dogs have. Most dogs live with us, and they're domesticated, but she was more of a wild dog. But I thought that was a nice story to write about how, after she had escaped all those times, that she decided to come back, and she slipped back under the hole that she had dug to get out and waited for me, and she never left again. I never worried about Shea running away again, and that's amazing for me. So that's why I thought it was a nice story to write. Yes, right here.
Do you have a family?
Do I have a
Family?
family? No, I don't have family anymore. My family is gone. Yes, right here. I really did have a dog named Shea, but Shea has been gone now for probably about 4 years. But she lived a nice long life. I had Shea for 10 years, and she had been living for 2 years on the streets. So she had a great life with me. We went on a lot of adventures, and we lived in Florida. And so I had a kayak, and Shea liked to ride in a kayak with me. So, right here.
How do you train a dog?
What's that?
How do you train a dog?
How do I train a dog? Well, there's a lot of techniques to train a dog. It's kind of long. It would be too hard for me to try to tell you how you train them. But the main thing is to get their attention. A dog is very good at ignoring you. So what you have to do is get the dog's attention. You go, hello dog, I'm trying to impart some information for you, and I'm trying to train you, so I need your attention, just like your teacher. If you're playing on a little Game Boy, you're looking into your computer, you're just sitting there talking, or playing your game, and your teacher is trying to talk and teach you something, you're not learning what the teacher is teaching you, right? Because you're too busy playing your little game and looking down here where all your focus is. So with dog training, you have to keep, like a teacher, reminding the kids to put down their games or put down their this or that, stop staring out the window, and pay attention to the lessons at hand. So that's what you kind of got to do with a dog too. Yes, in the back.
What kind of books do you like?
What kind of books do I like? I like adventure. And Shea's kind of an adventure. She's an adventurous one. And so I like adventure books. And you probably never heard of a character named Dirk Pitt. But Dirk Pitt is kind of like a James Bond guy. And so I used to read a lot of him because he rode around in submarines and he saved the world and this and that. So I like those kind of stories. Girl in the pink right there. Speak up. What kind of dogs do I like? I actually like all kinds of dogs. I grew up with, we had a border collie, we had a Samoyed, we had a Labrador, we had a mutt, you know, we had all kinds of different dogs. So they always say that you don't get the dog you want, you get the dog you need. So that's an interesting little ism there for you. Yes, girl right there with the glasses.
What was your first dog you ever had?
Well, Trixie, I had a cat. Well, that was the first animal I ever owned when I was 6. And I had the cat for 21 years. That was my cat. All the other dogs that we had generally were family dogs, so they were kind of the whole family's dog. But I had one of the earlier dogs that I had after I kind of grew up and moved out was I had a dog named Sandy, who was another kind of a stray shelter type dog, who I wasn't really sure what she was, but she had issues. She had issues. Right back there. Yes, right there with the glasses. No, the girl right there. There you go. What was what? The first book I ever read was called The Wonder Clock. And I've asked a gentleman in the back over here to look up that book because it, to this day, it still has an influence on me because it was written probably almost 300 years ago. But it has great stories about dragons and knights slaying dragons and trolls that lived under the bridge, and if you didn't say the right words, they would eat you. And so it was very, for me, it created a lot of imagery in my head. And I still remember it to this day. And the best part about it was that it always had a nice moral about someone who's been greedy or someone who's been mean. And so it's kind of like karma almost. So that was the first book that I read. All right, one more, right back over there. What's that? How old was which dog? Shea? Shea was 12. So I had Shea 10 years, and for the first 2 years, she's been living on the street. So,
Boys and girls, thank you for sitting up nice and straight. And thank you for listening. I really enjoyed the questions that you asked. I like how you asked your questions in complete sentences, and I heard some great academic vocabulary. For example, I heard somebody ask how Mr. Ozier was inspired. That's a really great word. Lots of great questions. Well, Mr. Ozier took time out of his day of being a very busy author, and he also has his own business teaching people how to train their dogs. And we really appreciate him taking time out of his busy day. So let's give him a big round of applause.
thank you very much. I appreciate it. You guys have been a great audience. Woo! Thank you.